Okay, so what I want to do today, all right, is to discuss performance attribution. So the goal of performance attribution, okay, is to explain where the performance is coming from. And for portfolio managers, okay, this is an indispensable tool. I mean, everybody are using it, okay, and it's actually became even more important now because now, you know, people want to actually automate, you know, the bonuses and all that, and this is kind of the tools, almost the only tools that they have. So what is the performance attribution? So first of all, we start from a benchmark. Okay, and we have our portfolio. And what we want to start, our starting point is basically some indices. And we discuss how to construct these indices in class. Okay, and each of these indices has a benchmark weight. So if I have three indices, for example, let's say I have the S&P, I have the NASDAQ, and I have the global bond index. Okay, let's say that this is 40, 30, 30. Okay, what it means is that in the S&P I have 40% of my holdings, let's say in market value. In NASDAQ I invest 30%, so I'm actually buying the index. And here, global bonds 30%. What does it mean? I buy all the, you know, I construct the index either through two ways. Now we have an ETF, or you just buy all the bonds in the index. Okay. Now inside the portfolio, you have the same, you know, you have the same assets that you invest in, but the weights are different. So this is the portfolio weights. Okay? The weights are different. So, you know, you would tell me, Yaakov, what happens if we're not investing in this, but let's say we're investing in emerging markets. Okay? So then in the benchmark, you will have 0% in emerging markets, while in your portfolio, maybe you have 100%. So then, in this case, W portfolio 1 will be 1, and all the other ones will be 0. Okay? Now, each one of those have performance. So you have a benchmark performance for each of those, and then you have a portfolio performance for each of those. Okay? Why the benchmark performance will be different from portfolio performance? Because maybe you invest in the same benchmark, right? But you may actually kind of, you know, let's say you invest in a sector. You may actually think that your sector is your benchmark. Let's say industrials. Industrial bonds is your benchmark. Okay, but what you do, you invest in industrials, but you invest in a different bonds than you have in the benchmark, which are still industrials. For example, let's say the industrial bonds have only two positions, IBM 50%, and then another position, let's say ExxonMobil 50%. But then again, okay, this is your benchmark, but these are not the only bonds which are industrial. For example, okay, let's say that Verizon, Tesla, and Apple are also industrial from the point of view of bonds, and you invest 30%, 30%, 40%. So you invested in the same sector, which is kind of your benchmark, but your investments were different. That's why the portfolio performance might be different for this kind of indices or sector than the benchmark. So then we are going to say that this is going to be the benchmark, the benchmark performance, and this is going to be my portfolio performance. Okay? Now, so we have two major categories. We have asset allocation, we have security selection. And whatever is left is basically the iteration effect. Okay, so I discussed, so in class, right, I discussed that asset allocation is basically you judge just on the, basically what we call the TAA. TAA is a tactical asset allocation. Okay, and in that case, you invest in the indices, but you just modify, okay, the weights. So basically, if let's say you invest in industrial bonds, you're going, and let's say that industrial bonds in your benchmark, okay, let's say are 40%, let's say, okay, then in this case, if you want to have just the TAA, you say, okay, I don't know which security to select, but I know that industrial bonds will outperform. You can say that inside your portfolio, okay, so this is your W benchmark, your W portfolio is going to be 60%, and you invest in the same assets. So while in the benchmark, if this is 40%, your portfolio is going to be, let's say, 20% IBM and 20% ExxonMobil. This is your benchmark because your benchmark is 40% of the entire investment, of your entire portfolio, investment universe. Okay, you will invest 30% in IBM and 30% in ExxonMobil. Okay, so you are going actually to overweight, but you just will overweight whatever is inside the benchmark. And then, how do you define asset allocation? For each sector, you define it as W portfolio minus W benchmark times the return of the benchmark. Okay, so basically, you're actually, in this case, you're creating a virtual portfolio where you are going to invest 60% inside the industrial bonds, and you are going to actually mimic by reproducing the benchmark. So in this case, you are going to invest exactly 30% in IBM, 30% in ExxonMobil. So whatever the benchmark return is, let's say the benchmark return would be, let's say, 2%. Okay, then in this case, you are going to get that your kind of asset allocation outperformance was basically 0.6 minus 0.4 times 0.2. Okay, now where's the kicker come from? So maybe here, okay, you actually outperform, but maybe in other portfolio you underperform. So let's say you have 60% in equities. So you have a benchmark of 40% industrial bonds and 60% in equities. Okay, so here you underperform, you underweight your equities. If you invest 60% in industrials, you're going to invest 40% in equities. And let's say that the S&P actually did return 5% in this case. Okay, so then what is going to be your outperformance, right? So then now we have to flip. This is going to be 0.4 minus 0.6 times 0.05. So here you will underperform, here you will outperform. Overall, here, okay, you are going to have basically 0.02 times 0.2, but then you have minus 0.2 times 0.05. So you're actually going to underperform, right? You're going to have here 0.2 minus 0.2 times 0.03. So this is going to be 60 basis points that you underperform. Now, the other piece of the puzzle is security selection. So now we discussed the asset allocation. The total asset allocation effect will be given by the formula W portfolio I minus W portfolio benchmark times R of the benchmark. That's going to be your asset allocation effect. Okay? The other piece of the puzzle, okay, is your security selection. Okay? So what is going to happen with your security selection? Your security selection works as follows. Okay? What you want to do, you want to quantify, right? What you want to do, you want to quantify your return. So let's say your return for your portfolio, okay, for this corresponding sector was different from this. This is going to capture, okay, your security selection. So then the security selection is going to be given by the following formula. For selection I is going to be W benchmark weight times the portfolio return minus the benchmark return. Okay, and if you want to look on the entire picture, you will of course sum it. Okay? So in this case, for example, let's say that inside your portfolio, for industrial bonds, okay, you didn't just select the industrial bonds, right? But you also invested in a different form. Okay? So let's say the performance here, all right, will be, let's say, 5% versus the benchmark that we said is going to perform 3%, maybe 6%, okay? Because you had Tesla and Tesla here and bonds for Tesla rallied, for example, okay? I mean, because Tesla is actually outperforming the market and all the stories, okay? So you have 6% for Tesla, and for the 6% for this entire bucket, okay? 6% for this entire bucket versus 3% for the industrial bucket in the benchmark. Then what is going to be your security selection effect? It is going to be 0.4 because this is going to be your benchmark times for security selection for the industrial bucket times 0.06 minus 0.03, okay, which is going to be basically 0.03 times 0.4, okay, which is going to be 1.2%. That's it. That's it, right? So in this case, for example, now if in the S&P, for example, you did not get any outperformance because you invested in a benchmark, you said, okay, I don't know anything about equities, so I just underweighted the equities. Okay, so here you have a 1.2% outperformance, but here you have, underperformance. Okay, so you are strong, so the investment manager or your manager knows that you are very good in selecting stocks or selecting bonds. Okay, however, you may lack some strategical, view of the market to say, okay, which portion of the market will outperform the entire portion. Okay, so that's how these things are working. Right? So I hope that this short video kind of explained to you, okay, the kind of the bolts and nuts of performance attribution. So this is going to be the asset allocation effect, and the total allocation security selection effect will be basically this. So you take the difference between the portfolio and the benchmark, and you multiply by the weighted average. Now, whatever is left is called interaction effect. So interaction effect is basically the total outperformance, which is given basically by the weights of the portfolio times the weights, times the returns of the portfolio minus the weights of the benchmark times the return of the benchmark. This is going to be your total outperformance, or what we call active outperformance or underperformance. Okay? And then in this case, what you are actually getting, okay, is that the total outperformance minus security effect selection, and minus asset allocation is going to be called interaction effect. Okay, the interaction effect is basically your sheer kind of element of luck. If you did two choices, maybe they kind of strengthened each other, but maybe they kind of canceled each other. Okay, and it might be so basically this is kind of your things which kind of measures how good your choices are combining together, how your security selection as a portfolio manager and your asset allocation as a portfolio manager is working together. Okay, so the fixed income in the fixed income world, we have something called factor attribution or factor outperformance, but maybe we will talk about this another time. The idea behind the factor attribution is that instead of looking on stocks and sectors, you're kind of decomposing your performance versus factors. So you can think about your benchmark as given in factor terms. For example, you have value, you have a size factor, you have market vector factor in CAPM and all this stuff. Okay? So hopefully you kind of understood the video. I hope that it actually will help us, and I'll see you in class.